I don't think we're quite done with the rally in the metals just yet. I think we need to build a little bit more optimism uh, in, in order to start the intermediate decline. So um, this is kind of what happens, and it happens in pretty much every intermediate cycle. When the bottom comes, it's hard to pull the trigger. This one not so much. This was triggered by the um, stock market collapse into the 4-year cycle low. But let's use this intermediate cycle low as an example, because this is kind of how these things progress. Um, Price had been trending down for a couple of months, and then usually these bottoms are difficult. The bottoms in gold form differently than they do in the stock market. They tend to churn for a while, so it makes it very hard to buy a position and hold it, and then wait for the intermediate rally. Um, so what this does, this difficult bottoming process, what does is once the rally does start to take off, traders don't trust it, and so they wait too long, and then they'll buy somewhere up in here once their emotions give them the all clear, and then that's usually when we either start a corrective move or more sideways churn. And so moving back to our current intermediate cycle, we had the violent rally out of that bottom, this intermediate bottom. This is also a yearly cycle low. And then we got into this multi-week back and forth churn where nothing followed through. And I warned people this was coming, that this was just going to take money away from both sides, bulls and bears alike. And that's exactly what it did. And I saw a lot of people get frustrated and give up. And this is just how retail type traders, novice or even intermediate traders behave. They want the market to do what they expect, and they want it to do it when they expect it. And the market rarely does that, so they get frustrated. They sell during the corrective phases, and then they buy, at the top of rallies, looking for some follow through. And when they don't get it, then they get frustrated and they give up. And this sets the stage for the next trending move. And so that's what's happened here. And I guarantee you what is transpiring underneath the market is that people became conditioned for a sideways churn. So they were not able to buy and hold as we started to break out of this churning phase. And I don't think we have developed the kind of optimism yet that will keep people holding and buying too soon as we move down into an intermediate cycle low. So that's what developed here. The market just went up and up and up and up and up. Everybody became convinced that the gold market was unstoppable, and I saw this in many of the comments in my premium website. As we started the intermediate decline, people had become convinced that the intermediate decline would be over very quickly, and that you had to be ready to pull the trigger quick, or you were going to miss it. They'd become conditioned by this. And of course, what happened was that we went about as far away from that scenario as you could go. This took a long time, a very difficult move down. That just no real follow through one way or another. And then when we did get the bottom, again, very difficult bottoming pattern. So this phase washed out that sentiment that price was going higher, and that you had to be ready to pull the trigger quickly, and that mentality was produced by this rally. So I think we need to produce that sentiment, that fear of missing out sentiment. And once we do, then we'll be set up for the next intermediate decline, where traders will be buying way too soon, and then they'll get stuck. And I expect something similar, a difficult sideways grinding move, and then probably a difficult bottoming pattern, something very similar to this, not so much like this one, I don't think. But as of right now, I think we're still in the phase where the people that got knocked off during the sideways churn, they're not quite sure yet whether it's safe to go back in the market. Once those people get drawn back in, and then everybody becomes convinced that the gold can only go higher, then I think we'll get our intermediate top, and then that long sideways churn down into the next intermediate cycle low. So as you can see, right now gold is still behaving as if it's in the advancing phase of an intermediate cycle. We got marginally oversold here yesterday, and then price has bounced out of that oversold condition. And I've noted this many times in my videos that during the advancing phase, price doesn't tend to stay oversold very long before the next rally begins. And then when you get into the declining phase of the intermediate cycle, it's the exact opposite. Price doesn't tend to stay overbought very long, and then it tends to get either deeply oversold or it embeds in the oversold condition. So we don't have anything yet that would suggest to me that we have started the intermediate degree decline, the declining phase of the intermediate cycle. And I think we still need to build that euphoria phase where everybody becomes convinced that they have to buy the dip, they have to be prepared to buy the dip quickly because they're going to get left behind. Once that mentality is embedded in traders' psyche, then I think we'll be prepared for a multi-week decline into the intermediate cycle low. So now let me go over to silver. Usually, in order to create that final euphoric phase, usually you'll get a short period at the very end of an intermediate cycle, usually sometimes 2.5, 3 weeks, where silver just really starts to go crazy. This here is a classic example, just these big percentage moves. This was like 5 or 6%. Typical of a euphoria phase. And I am not seeing that yet. I'm seeing these breakouts above these resistance zones. I'm seeing retests of the resistance as support. Now we're trying to break through the next resistance zone. This doesn't look like the kind of type of euphoric, just get me in at any cost type mentality that tends to signal that we're near an intermediate or approaching an intermediate top. This still looks like a wall of worry. Silver's trying to break through this next resistance level, and then once we do that, the next resistance would be the baby bull highs, which is a little above 21. So I think we probably got to get through this and at least get to those baby bull highs before this intermediate cycle is ready to top and has developed the kind of excessive bullish sentiment that would power an intermediate decline. And we may even have to go through that 21 level on silver before we've developed that kind of sentiment and ready for a long grinding move down into the intermediate cycle low. But right now, the market is still doing what it has to do to take money away from novice and intermediate traders. It's still climbing the wall of worry. Traders are still very nervous. They're ready to sell quickly on any kind of pullback, and that's generally a sign that we're still in the intermediate advance. Once these traders become completely convinced that the metals are going higher and there's no risk, then we'll be ready for a top and a move down into the intermediate cycle low. And then that's when I'll be looking to buy heavily when everybody else is afraid and can't pull the trigger. And that this is, how I've made money for decades. I like to buy when everyone else is scared, and I like to sell when everyone else is euphoric.